Okay guys, so the breaking news story today is Dan Ashworth, Newcastle's Director of Football, has basically handed in a transfer request to join Manchester United. Now we're going to look at it. Is it a lack of ambition by Newcastle? Is it a lack of loyalty by Dan Ashworth? Or is it FFP once again haunting Newcastle this season? Okay, so Dan Ashworth has told Newcastle only 2 years after joining and being excited by the project that he wants to leave and join Manchester United. Now, he's been placed on gardening leave by Newcastle. Now, what that means is he's going to have no access to the key information that he would have. So the scouting network, all of the key financials and everything like that, because he's going to go and join a direct competitor. You don't want him to have access of this information. So he's going to be getting full pay until this is resolved to basically just sit at home. Now, it's not in Newcastle's interest to keep paying someone and get nothing in return. But Newcastle will probably feel a little bit slighted by Manchester United. Now, if you remember a year ago, Newcastle were interested in a loan signing, just literally a 6-month one, for Jesse Lingard. Newcastle were told it was going to be around £15-16 million loan fee for Jesse Lingard. So Newcastle were known to have a lot of money. Manchester were trying to exploit that. Now, it's come full circle, and Newcastle have something that Manchester United want. And not only do they want, but they're desperate for it. The new part Manchester United owner has been very keen for Dan Ashworth to link up with him. It's only been a few days that it's really heated up in the press, and it's gone from 0 to 60, and it's resulted in Dan Ashworth saying he wants to leave the club. Now, Manchester United, a club that have been spending money like it's going out of fashion in the last couple of years. Anthony, Sancho, tons of others, countless examples, Casemiro, Varane, all of these where they've probably been overspending for what they get. Now, Dan Ashworth is probably seen as someone who can fetch in, rein in that spending and make it a lot more efficient operation. So the figures that are being talked around at the moment are between 10 and 20 million for Dan Ashworth. Okay, so what is that extra 10 million to Manchester United? Probably not a lot, because that's what they want. But for someone who's a non-playing asset, who's not really going to bring anything to the team, it is a lot of money. But the efficiency that Dan Ashworth can bring, and Newcastle will probably not be willing to negotiate and letting them off with much in this negotiation. Now, we've got a Facebook page, Newcastle Supporters Worldwide. I'll put a link below if you're watching this on YouTube, on the North East Updates YouTube channel. Follow that for breaking news with Newcastle United and stay up to date with everything. Now, the consensus, a lot of the comments when we were reading through last night seemed to be calling for a lack of loyalty from Ashworth. Now, he did join 2 years ago. It was an exciting project. He's presumably going to double, triple, quadruple, whatever his money. He's in for a huge, huge payday. What you've got to do is you've got to ask yourself as a fan, remove your Newcastle cap for a second. If someone came in and double, triple, whatever your wage, you would go to another place in a heartbeat. He's not a Geordie. He doesn't have any real reason to be loyal. And really, what he's had to put up with is his hands being handcuffed by this financial fair play. He would have come in to an exciting project, it was very exciting at the time, but as we've seen in the last 6 months, we're pretty much at the top of the financial fair play. We can't go out and spend. That Lewis Hall deal really signified it, if nothing else did. We had to put a loan with an obligation to buy him because we didn't have the money to buy him and still stick within financial fair play. That was a real eye-opener, and it just shows as well that we pretty much are at the very brim of FFP. Now that just means that Dan Ashworth's hands are being tied massively. He's not going to have a ton of budget, even in next year, to work around with. It's a rolling 3-year thing with FFP. Newcastle, over the course of the last 3 years, this is when all of their spending's been done. So it's not a case of wait until the summer and there'll be an infinite amount of money to spend again. It's still going to be a massive FFP restriction that we're going to have to deal with. In January, Eddie Howe actually came out and said, before we buy, we might have to sell. So there's still rumours at the moment that Newcastle might have to sell a star player to really invest funds into the transfer kitty. Now, Dan Ashworth is probably going to be very frustrated with that because he's going to be doing all of this work, scouting and getting all of these amazing talents forward, only to be told we can't buy him, we can't get him, and we can't get him. At Manchester United, he's not going to have that. He's going to basically have this unlimited resources, because the amount of turnover that Manchester United do is absolutely gigantic. Yes, they've spent a ton of money in recent years and stuff like that, not really seen much in return for it, so they're going to have a little bit of FFP restriction, but they're going to have a ton that they'll be able to spend, you would imagine. So personally, I don't blame Dan Ashworth if he wants to leave. Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I would have liked him to stay. I rate him. I think he's fantastic. But if he wants to go, he's not a Geordie. He's getting a huge bumper pay increase. I would do it. Everyone else would do it if I'm being totally honest with myself. But for me, this is financial fair play restricting Newcastle. Not only is it restricting Dan Ashworth's job, but you would imagine when Dan Ashworth has said that he wants to leave, Newcastle are restricted with how much wages they can even offer him to stick within financial fair play. You would imagine they would have tried to match at least what Manchester United are doing, but Manchester United unfortunately have got a much higher glass ceiling with FFP to play around with. Now I don't know if you guys watch this or not, but this is Football Podcast. Gary Lineker, it's got Mika Richards and it's got Alan Shearer. Earlier this week they were talking about FFP and Alan Shearer suggested that there's going to be changes to FFP coming. Now I've heard rumours about this because FFP doesn't seem like it's fit for purpose. You can see this with Newcastle United. They've got all of these billionaire owners in who want to spend a ton of money and their hands are being tied behind their back, while Manchester City can just go on over the last 10 years and spend exactly what they want. You see 10-point deductions for Everton seems very, very excessive considering we've seen a team go bankrupt and get a 10-point deduction. It seems, for Everton's point of view, they were only a £20 million over and they got a 10-point deduction, which really, in most other seasons, would be a relegation for a club like Everton. We've seen Nottingham Forest as well get picked. It seems to be all of these small teams, but when Chelsea and Man City do it, it seems to be all right, and it's grouped in, and you can see their expensive lawyers are dragging it out as much as possible. So personally, for Newcastle, it would be the best thing in recent years, other than the takeover, to happen to Newcastle, because it means that we wouldn't have these restrictions, or not as much. Will it happen? Will it not? I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on it? It seems very suspect if Everton and Nottingham Forest get punished this season and then FFP just disappears and stuff like that. Would that happen? I don't know. Again, let us know your thoughts. Now, what we're seeing with Dan Ashworth is nothing unusual. If you think of yourself as a Championship club or lower Premier League club, if you had a superstar, a good young'un come through the ranks or a star player, it was always likely that they were going to get poached by a top club, whether it's Manchester United, whether it's Chelsea, whether it's Man City, Liverpool, whatever. It's very hard to keep someone, especially a top young player, if a club like that comes knocking. It's just something that has always been widely expected that a player just cannot do, and you cannot keep an unhappy player. But this financial fair play is making it a little bit more obvious and a little bit more difficult, because like I say, Newcastle would want to keep Dan Ashworth, have the money to make his job so enriching and all that different stuff, and basically make him a kid in a candy store and go out and get all of these superstar players. His hands are tied. He's probably unhappy in his job as a result, and this is why he's jumping to Manchester United, because of the wage and because of the lack of restrictions that Manchester United have got. Now, I've spoken about FFP. I can't stand it. I've never really understood it massively, because it was fetched in to stop people from going bankrupt and really hurting the league. But what it's done in essence is it's stopped anyone from competing with the top 6 club. It's almost given them a bit of a bumper where they're getting increased revenue, they're getting Champions League money. How is anyone supposed to compete with that and jump up with that? Now, I know the consensus is Dan Ashworth is not loyal, but from what I've said there, what's your thoughts? Is it FFP? Is Dan Ashworth unloyal? Would you do it if it was exactly the same situation? And what's your thoughts on FFP? Is that the thing that's made Dan Ashworth move in essence here? And do you think there's any truth, or can you expect it to be changed at the end of the season? Don't forget, like, follow, subscribe, do all the usual stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.